So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and the cold fix, as it has been dubbed, has been released, so the next version of the game is out, although this battle itself is on the old one. But from this point onwards, of course, I will be giving preferential treatment, as it were, to replays that are from the newer build, and I will be trying to use them more so than battles that I've already been given on the older build. Now, of course, I will still be using some replays from this build because I haven't quite got through all of them yet, but of course moving forwards there will be a little bit more importance placed on the newer build, as the old build is fully phased out, as it were. So yeah, going to be interesting. It's also worth saying that I tried to actually record a different battle from the older build today, and we would have been seeing the settlement that's currently dubbed as Umbar, but unfortunately there was a ton of crashing problems in that one as well. So yeah, I mean, this build has... Waving goodbye to this build won't bring me too much sadness, to be honest with you, because it has been a bit of a nightmare for me, to be honest with you, with regards to its mechanical fidelity. But hopefully with some of the fixes that have been introduced in the cold fix, that won't be as prevalent, especially with regards to stuff like rangers. Like, the mechanical tax of that will probably be toned down a little bit, let's hope anyway. But for now, we will be in effect waving goodbye to this build with a nice meaty siege of CARN DUM. So previously we saw the forces of evil rooted out of Buur-Sagath. Now will they be taken away from CARN DUM as well? So it's going to be evil on the defence once again, the forces of good on the attack, and we'll go through the armies that are on the attack first and foremost. Starting off with Infantry 7, who's going to be playing as Arthedain, a nice well-rounded faction with a slight emphasis on their archers and their cavalry. Their infantry maybe not quite as impressive as some of the other Western Kingdoms of men, but still very passable. Arthedain Marksman, very nice archer to skirmish with other enemy archers with, decently heavy armour, even without the armour upgrades, like still relatively thick chainmail, and they will be quite comfortable in a skirmish fight, and that will be exactly the sort of thing that you want to see when you're on the attack in a siege. Combination of Arthedain pikemen and Arthedain men-at-arms, again without the armour upgrades, so saving a little bit of money there, so they're not quite as durable as they could be, but still decently numerous, and you know, this is the sort of thing you expect from Arthedain. A solid unit of shielded infantry alongside their pikemen is very commonplace for Arthedain. Faunus terrain defenders in behind them, of course. This is what most of these central Arthedain units look like when they're fully upgraded, but the Faunus terrain defenders come with this level of armour as standard. They're by no means brilliant at dealing damage to infantry. Again, like most Western spears that are heavily armoured, they are decently tanky. They have access to the shield wall formation as well, but of course the main downside to them is that they do tend to have low attack scores and a spear malice on top of that against infantry. So they're still here though, and I think a good choice in this situation, especially when you have options for damaging infantry such as this, Dismounted Faunus terrain knights, obviously the heavy swordsman. This is the kind of unit which in the hotfix is actually going to be made much more viable. That's the hope anyway, but even here, to be fair, they do have their place in an army like this because it helps offset the fact that most of the main body of this Arthedain army is focused around efficiency and survivability and the like, whereas a unit like this is definitely all about the damage. Speaking of which, Dunedain Peacekeepers against lower end units, in particular this unit of axe wielding line infantry is incredibly effective because of their higher attack score than most other infantry of this price point, though of course, you know, lower unit count, you know, Dunedain, sort of similar traits in some ways to the elves, and that comes with all of the strengths and weaknesses that come along with that. But also against units of higher quality, especially if they're supported, their additional attack can be really, really useful. A very nice unit indeed, I very much approve of them. And the Illuminous Gate Guards, very nice unit to have in the centre of things because they buff the morale of nearby troops. And finally, General's Bodyguard going to be the Dismounted Knights of Illuminous. So again, a little bit more of a focus around a robust unit this, like some people would go for the Wardens of the White Tower because, you know, they offer a little bit more in the attack, both at range and in melee. But the Dismounted Knights of Illuminous, of course, are significantly tankier, and that's where the General's going to be at today. So definitely a robust army this from Infantry 7. We're also going to see the Hobbit folk from Froggy today. Had the pleasure of playing with him just yesterday. 3 units of the Proudfoot protectors here, so obviously the Crossbow Pike hybrid. I think that's 3 units of them anyway. It looks like it with the gaps between them, yes. 3 units of them, so definitely going into the red limit here, but definitely worthwhile because Crossbows crossed with Pikes are fantastic in most situations, especially in a siege like this. They'll be able to do a lot of damage with their crossbows at range, of course, and then in melee they will be very useful as well. And it's not as if the Hobbits have got too much in the way of expensive units to spend their money on, so going into the red limit is maybe a little bit more viable for them. Farmers of Buckland, really high damage shock infantry this. Like, they are off the charge, they do an enormous amount of damage. They're of course armor piercing, but as with most hobbits, you know, individually they're not the most durable units, so that is going to be their downfall if there is going to be one. Battling Brandybucks are pretty much the lower tier version of that, lower stats across the board and cheaper, and pretty much the same set of weaknesses, and the rest of the Hobbit army is hiding, so I'd imagine there's Hobbitry and arms, maybe a unit of Dunedain Rangers in here as well. And actually there is a unit of Ents at the very least, and a couple of Hobbits coming across here to help out his Gondorian ally in battling Brandybucks. Speaking of which, Clem playing as Gondor, civilians pushing up the towers. That's a lot of towers, so the defending towers from CARN Dune won't be doing too much damage to Gondor, you'd imagine, with this huge wooden wall he's put in the way. Catapult, so again, nice bit of siege weaponry, always useful in a siege like this when you have to crack through some walls to maybe open up a few more openings. Citadel Guard, obviously Gondor, you know, their armor-piercing spear variety is always on point, and the Citadel Guard, I'm a big fan of them. They're very expensive, but they're one of those units that even though they are very expensive, they're worth every penny. Very useful. Similar story for the Fountain Guard here, if not more so with the Fountain Guard, to be honest with you, just because of how brutally effective they can be when things get grindy in melee. 2 units of them. Fully upgraded Axemen of Lasarnak, nice amount of AP, which will be useful to deal with quite a few of the defenders. Ravenhelms, of course, a little bit more in terms of the base damage. There's also the Vanguard of King Elisar in there as well. Again, units which will benefit from the coming of the Hotfix. A couple of units of unupgraded Gondor infantry as well, interestingly enough. A couple of units of Pelagia Marines with their javelins. Marksmen of Caer Andros, deadly at range and deadly in melee, big fan of them as well. And then finally, General's Bodyguard, Nimlothian Honour Guard, I think. Yep, that's just it. The only unit that's here. And again, my personal favourite of all Gondor's high tier infantry, because it definitely fits with their MO. And then finally, we're actually seeing Dorwinion again. So after a long spell really of not really seeing Dorwinion at all, we've seen them a fair amount over the past couple of weeks. And it's going to be Blue Ranger. He's got some Elvalin Vanguard. Again, similar to Gondor, they do have the ability to field quite a lot of these heavily armoured units, which are very good in terms of getting efficiency. They may struggle a little bit with regards to their variety a bit more, but I do think they have all the tools necessary to be a success in a battle like this. Lots of Elvalin infantry, lots of Erenvorn Axemen, so this is one of those units that you can bring to do maybe a little bit more damage as Dorwinion, but they're a low tier axe unit with not a lot of armour, so I mean their survivability is really woeful. So if they're going to do damage, you need to look after them, and I don't think that's what Blue Ranger is going to do, considering he's got them on the towers. That's probably not going to be what happens with them. Moragwendi Pikemen, if they're safe till later, they could be devastating. We shall see. Elvalin Vanguard back over here, Moragwendi Bowmen, and then finally General's Bodyguard again, another high tier unit of infantry. The Moragwendi Glade Masters, absolutely devastating unit of Elven infantry there. And then inside the settlement we can see Lord Sylvestron, who's playing as Umbar. So Umbar, of course, a really nice infantry strength, Balakith Shield Bearers, Corsair Fencers. Up on the walls we can see there are some Corsair Infantrymen, as well as some Balakith Marksmen. Corsair Infantry down here, a Dunaim Shield Guard, Shield Bearers, a Dunaim Lancers over here, also another unit of Fencers. So yeah, pretty symmetrical look to his defence down here. Mac in the Wild, who's playing as Angmar, so they're going to be fighting on their home turf. Angmar Marauders, some Snaga Stalkers in here as well. Got some Snaga Archers up on the walls. Barrow Wights combined with Pikemen is a really difficult front line to get through. Maybe Mass would be your best option there, considering the Phalanx and considering the Meat Shield. Scourge Raiders, of course, you know, they throw a projectile in and then charge into melee. Pretty good at doing both, but they are definitely very vulnerable to arrow fire. Actually, we'll just go right around the outside of the settlements and then head up onto the higher layer. Finally, we have Hrothgar Heavenlight, who's going to be who's the player who sent me the battle replay, so big thank you to him. Rhudaur, Angmar's closest allies and underlings. We can see over here Rhudaur Clansmen and Axemen on the front line, as well as some Dunman Hunters up on the walls who are already firing, actually, interestingly enough. Clansmen, once again, some upgraded, some not. Rhudaur Axemen, that's a lot of axes that Rhudaur could bring, of course. Very nice unit in this sort of situation because of their numbers and their damage, even if they are a little bit fragile. Cranoline Berserkers, damaging in melee and at range. 2 units of Cranoline Pikemen, I like going into the red limit for them because, you know, they're so effective at what they do, especially in a situation like this where you have a bit more money to play with. A couple of units of Etten Troll Hunters there. A couple of Rhudaur Marksmen, a unit of Franodyne Rangers. Of course, Rangers are pretty much a given in a battle like this. And then up here, we'll start to see Forodrim Javelins, Blackwolds. Obviously some really scary stuff up here. Maybe not Snaga Stalkers and Orc Fellas, but Mac in the Wild is at least spreading his strength around a little bit. Witcher-Arm Pikemen, Hammerguard, the Witchers, always a devastating unit as well. Goblin Trackers, Trolls of Gundabad, and then some units from Umbar as well, including a catapult and some Corsair crossmen, and a few units at the back as well, which we'll quickly gloss over as well. Enslavers, Harbingers, Narin Sentinels, Blackwatch Legion, Blackguard, and Goblin Trackers as well. So, yeah, real interesting spread this, and I'll be definitely interested to see where this battle goes. Under normal circumstances, I will give the advantage to the attackers, not so much as I would in a 5v3, but I definitely think the strengths across all of these factions is pretty good. Gondor, Dorwinion, and Arthedain are very durable factions. The Hobbits, numerous, kind of a weird faction as well. Like, they are definitely very effective. We'll see how well they do here, though. I mean, they do have a bit of a slant towards AP, interestingly enough, which is actually not going to be that good against Rhudaur, but it will be against Umbar and Angmar if they can deploy it properly. So without further ado, let's begin. And let's hope for no crashes on this one, because I do want to send off this build of the game with a little bit less, well, a little bit more than just a resounding thud. DUM Manhunters opening up immediately. I don't know how much damage they're actually going to be able to do here. I mean, the Hobbits, as I said, kind of difficult to hit because of their small stature anyway. They're also behind all of these siege towers. You don't really want to be wasting ammunition as the defenders, even if you're evil on the defense. Generally speaking, it is going to be important to try and maintain your ammunition. I do like the fact that the Hobbits are playing more of a support role to Gondor and Arthedain's advances here. I'm already losing my voice because of the failed recording I did just a second ago. But I also feel as though, yeah, the Ents are going to rush across over here and maybe help out Dorwinion. I do think Dorwinion is more actually in need of help than Gondor especially, but also Arthedain. Because Dorwinion, most of their damage will come from their Elven units, which you don't want to commit straight away. Especially going into Umbar, stuff like the Elvelin, I mean, they're tanky, but they're in no way going to be able to withstand the damage and overall expertise that Umbar is going to be able to throw at them. Meanwhile, here on the blackened battlements, you can see the DUM Manhunters. A couple of units of them. So I mean, DUM Manhunters, like, their ammunition isn't super important to Rhudaur here, because of course when it comes to their range threats, Rhudaur are all about the axe throwers and the javelins. But when you're on the defense, you need to use. You can't afford to throw too many of your units away unthinkingly. Too many of those kind of mistakes will land you in very hot water, as we saw previously, of course, on Bursagath, where things didn't necessarily go the way of the defenders because they kind of had different ideas about how to handle certain things. So you can see here, I think now we are going to start to see a little bit more movement going up to time 6 speed just to try and speed things along a little bit here. Yeah, that'll do. Now, as soon as I did that, there goes a section of CARN Doom's walls. Meanwhile over here, battling Brandybucks now moving forward. I mean, to be fair, it doesn't really matter what unit you send up with your sort of siege engines as the Hobbits. Like, none of them are particularly heavily armoured. You can see here just wearing their sort of farmers' dungarees and sort of bringing their lumber axes and big mallets to the field. But still, I mean, you underestimate the Hobbits at your peril. They're nasty little buggers, let me tell you. I'm a little bit surprised that Angmar isn't the one that's sort of taking the bull by the horns, though, because Arthedain, I should say. Because, of course, it's the sort of thing, especially with the kind of army they brought, a very workman-like army with a lot of shielded, heavier infantry. Even the units that are unshielded have got that about them. The pikemen are really the only unit that I wouldn't want to send in too quickly if I were Arthedain. There's also the Dunedain Rangers here, of course, so not foregoing them. Farmers of Buckland actually returning, so I actually kind of agree with this, because I think Gondor will be fine without too much support. Whereas I do think Dorwinion and Arthedain maybe lack a little bit in terms of their infantry strength in comparison to the Gondorians. Barrow Whites there. You can actually see as well, the Dunedain Lance is going to charge out, maybe going to try and interrupt what Gondor is doing, because Gondor is using the catapult to batter through the walls, which I approve of, actually. If you can open up holes in the walls, it is better in most circumstances to do that than use the siege towers, because the siege towers, it can be quite awkward to use them. And yeah, Gondor, he got a little bit too comfortable with this. He needs to sort of move his army a little bit more because the catapult is exposed. He's quite fortunate there, actually, that most of the Dunedain Lancers there, the pathfinding didn't do Umbar the biggest of favours and instead made them collide with the civilians. But the catapult crew is going to have to run away, and they should be able to save this catapult, Gondor, but it's a distraction I'm sure he wouldn't have wanted to start with, and now he's also going to have to deal with the Dunedain Lancers charging in. They need to be careful though here, charging a little bit too greedily and deeply into the Gondor lines, and yeah, they rout in the end. Charging into just that unit of infantry that had separated off a little bit would have been fine, but going right into the middle of the Gondorian army was never really going to work. They will return from routing. It is interesting that they don't have locked morale when most of the other Black Númenóreans in Umbar's roster do. But of course the question of Lancer morale has already been very much dealt with in the hotfix.
The enemy's ram has breached the gates.
Hobbits now battering through that gate. They need to finish the job though, Gondor over here. They need to batter down this wall because now they can't actually fix their siege towers to this anymore, so they're going to need the hole if they want to get through here. They're going to put up a siege tower on this side of things as well. Rhudaur axemen in position, the DUM Manhunters firing away, shooting into the band of brass archers, doing a decent amount of damage, battling brandy bucks against Rhudaur axemen. 2 shock units. You can see coming in here, Infinity 7. Engaging with the upgraded Rhudaur clansmen. They're actually going to get rear charged as well by the Rhudaur axemen. I mean, this is a little bit naive of Infinity 7 to just send in a single unit of line infantry into a really deadly situation like this. Especially now they're going to get rear charged. These Arthedain men-at-arms are not going to survive too long at all in this situation. DUM Manhunters firing away. Faunus terrain defenders moving across. Arthedain pikemen, yeah, that's not going to last too long. I mean, Froggy's going to try and bail out these Arthedain men-at-arms, but I don't think he's going to have too much success with that. There we go. Gondor do finish the job. Enemy siege tower has been destroyed, eh? That one back there. So I would imagine that's from the defending towers. You can actually see over here, the civilians are routing. I mean, this is the problem with civilians. They've pushed up the towers, but they haven't actually pushed them up far enough to get them into play. See over here, Dorwinion have also moved in. They've got their siege tower into place. Are they going to use it? Yes, there are units in there already. The Vanguard are also going to batter down the gate. So I like this actually from the attack, because I do like the fact that they're pressuring the 2 flanks pretty readily. Gondor also need to be prepared to do the same thing. That's the Adunai Lancers again, coming back for another bite of the cherry. But, I mean, that's probably why the civilians routed, actually, come to think of it. But again, this is more of an inconvenience for Gondor than anything else. But I'm really surprised by this. Like, Gondor, if you don't learn your lesson the first time around, again, this is another example of the Lancers in 0.97 standard, pre-hotfix being maybe a little bit underwhelming. I mean, there's no way the Adunai Lancers should be shaken in this situation. I mean, they haven't been engaged by the Citadel Guard yet. Like, maybe when the Citadel Guard collide with them, it'll be a different story. I can understand them being shaken, but Gondor are very fortunate here, I think. I think the Adunai Lancers, they're not going to be able to finish off... Well, actually, they will. They will be able to finish off the catapult crew here, I think. Ooh, are they? The Adunai Lancers, will they hold on? I mean, the Citadel Guard, Gondor will be incredibly fortunate if they get the Adunai Lancers to break here. I think they are going to break before... You know, there's only 2 catapult crewmen left. One, yeah, the catapult's dead. And Gondor has no one to blame for that but themselves. I mean, it happened once, and as soon as it happens once, you leave a unit of spears out here to guard your catapult. You don't just leave it wide open again. What bugs me about that is Gondor managed to... got away with it through good fortune last time when the pathfinding sent that cavalry into the civilians. And then he went and made the same mistake again, and I think it's only right that this time he didn't get away with it and he loses his artillery. His artillery hasn't been useless. He has opened up a couple of holes, one over on his side of things and one over here to help out the Hobbits and Arthedain, but definitely not how he would have wanted his catapult to be dealt with. Rhudaur Rangers are here. They're, of course, going to be doing damage. The Ents are in here as well. I mean, this is going to be interesting. Scourge Raiders coming in. The Hobbits and Arthedain are actually coming forward very aggressively here, so I mean, he's definitely asking a lot of good questions of Rhudaur. The Rhudaur Axemen now, I mean, they were doing okay against the battling Brandy Bucks, but now that the Faunus terrain defenders are adding their numbers to things, they're not going to be able to withstand this onslaught up on the walls for too much longer. More units coming in from Arthedain Manhunters. This is better from Infinity 7. After a bit of a shaky start, sending in just the 1 unit, his army and the Hobbits. And now here in numbers and asking real questions of Rhudaur. Now, Rhudaur's AP should be enough to allow them to dig themselves out of that particular hole. Easier than most, but still interesting times. Dorwinion are also now up on the walls. One of that Nandor Glade Guard alongside the Elvelyn Infantry should be more than sufficient to hack and slash their way through a unit of unupgraded Corsair Infantry, which is the only thing holding the line up here. The Corsair Fencers are in there as well, though. They're a completely different proposition. Much, much stronger. Where are the Umbar Archers? There are some Balaketh Marksmen over here, but I'm actually surprised Umbar hasn't got some archers over here ready to shoot up onto the walls as the enemy climb up here. can actually see over here as well, a bit of a counter-attack. Maybe a little bit too gung-ho this from Umbar. Sending the Corsair infantry out into the Alvelin. The Alvelin are much more professional infantry than the dirty Corsairs. And the Corsairs, as a result, will be relatively easily dealt with. Keldrin and Patrol are there, taking shelter behind, I think. No, they're actually going up the walls, so they're intending to get their javelins up onto the walls. So some very interesting plays here. Dorwinion still have quite a lot of their army back, which again I'm always a little bit leery of, because you need to have reinforcements on hand to keep the assault going. If your attack falls apart, it's never a good look, and it rarely ends with the attackers having a good time. It's one of the main things you can aim for as a defender. If you make an attack fall apart, it can be really, really demoralising. Rhudaur marksmen, the Ranodyne Rangers have hidden themselves once again. You can see here Ranodyne Berserkers, Essenmauls, Troll Hunters, all of these hand-thrown projectiles doing a ton of damage, and it's been a brutal fight over on this side of the settlements, I have to say. The Hobbits and Arthedain crashing into Rhudaur and Angmar, mainly Rhudaur. Ranodyne Rangers have just repositioned themselves over to here, near the Orc forges and tents. Farmers of Buckland have cleared the walls. You can see over on that side the Faunus terrain defenders took the direct route down to try and push this line back a little bit, give the attackers a bit more breathing room, which I think is a decent idea. The farmers of Buckland are now coming forward as well, and the Ranodyne Rangers are going to have to run. Thing is though, it might be tempting to go after the easier target that is the Rhudaur marksman, but you need to keep going for the Ranodyne Rangers, otherwise they'll just turn around and shoot into this unit here, and they're going to do that anyway. Can they get a good charge here? I think they should be able to. I mean, they do at least make it into melee, which is better than nothing, and they're going to force the Ranodyne Rangers back. This is good play, this from Froggy. Sort of making Rhudaur's life a little bit more difficult with their archers, some of their ranged units not being as efficient as they could be. More men-at-arms coming up onto the walls. I think they actually do need more down here on the ground war, though, because between the Ranodyne pikemen and all of the other basic Rhudaur troops that are here, the support coming in from the archers that are still firing and the javelins, and also, let's not forget the Scourge Raiders doing their bit in melee. Decent in melee as well, this unit. And more men-at-arms are falling. Arthedain's army in particular seems to have taken a seems to have had a hefty toll exacted upon it. Proudfoot protectors, using their bolts on Rhudaur marksmen. That's a sign of the desperation the attackers are feeling over here. They need to try and stop Rhudaur from continuing to shoot with their ranged units. They're not really able to do so, and if you're using Proudfoot protectors, even if you do have 3 of them on a unit of Rhudaur marksmen, it's not really what you want to be doing. Over here though, I mean, Angmar is probably concerned with supporting Rhudaur in their push. Over here, I mean, stuff like Angmar Marauders is not going to be too much for concern, considering the amount of quality Gondor have. Snaga still trying to do some damage to Gondor as they're over there, but this is where the huge, almost mobile forts that Clem has brought in the shape of all of those siege towers is going to pay some dividends. And the Gondor infantry is also somewhat concealed. Let's see what's going on over here. Corsair fencers. Yeah, you can see as well up here, no reinforcements close enough for Dorwinion to keep this assault going, and between the fencers and also the shield bearers that made their way up onto the walls, it's not looking good for Dorwinion all of a sudden over here. Things are going pretty well for the defenders so far, as it needs to if the defenders are to win a battle of this type. And the attack is actually continuing to sort of move outwards here. Another unit of Corsair infantry coming out here to try and make something happen, but you can see here the Erinvorn Axemen coming forward, the Alvelin are still moving in. So I mean, this is probably the one black mark against the defenders so far. I mean, they are throwing this light infantry outside, but Dorwinion is going to be able to clean them up, and that's going to be manpower that could have been maybe used a little bit more efficiently. Balakith marksmen are still here. What are they firing at, I wonder? They're probably trying to shoot along this line over here, but they're not going to have them. I mean, Keldrin and Patrol are there, but there's wrecks of siege towers in the way. Balakith marksmen using their flaming ammunition. More Dorwinion troops are arriving now, but it's a little bit late. I mean, they could have really pressed home an advantage here if they had done this sooner, but now I think all they're really going to be doing is feeding kills into the Umbar archers, which is not exactly what you want. Gondor infantry going to try and batter down the gates over here. Maybe not fancying going into the teeth of this Angmar defence. It's pretty scary, but I do think Gondor needs to make something happen here, because the fight hasn't necessarily gone to code for the attackers on the two sides. Yeah, you can see the Hobbits and Arthedain for a little while were forcing Rhudaur backwards, but Rhudaur has taken the decision to bring more units down here, units they had in reserve, including the Black Wolves, which of course are going to be devastating against the Arthedain units in particular. Less so against the Hobbits, but still. And the Reforged Javelins are also down here now as well. Reforged Javelins are here. Farmers of Buckland in behind enemy lines. They were able to do some more damage to the Rangers, which look largely gone at this point, to be fair, but dismounted Knights of Illuminus. Gondor battering through the central gate. I mean, this is the Arthedain general, this, and he's also alone, and the Reforged Javelins still have ammunition. I mean, Infinity 7 has been, to his credit, he has been trying to make something happen. He hasn't just been brainlessly sending his men into the same choke point to die. But I feel as though it's all about the quantity of units he's sent in certain situations here. Dismounted Knights of Faunus taking 2 volleys before getting into melee, so a lot of damage already done, and with that amount of damage, they're getting shot in the side, and the Reforged Javelins, their armour piercing in melee as well, so I'd imagine this is probably going to be the end of Arthedain's general, which will not have been the start to this fight that he would have wanted. There's still some Arthedain, well, the Arthedain pikemen have come forward. Now that there's less arrows flying around, this is the better time for them to be here at least. But they don't have a lot in the way of support here, do they? It's mostly just them trying to hold back the braying Northman herds. There's still Proudfoot protectors firing away. They've still got the Faunus Terrain Knights, they've still got Dunedain Rangers. Arthedain Marksmen trying to shoot over the hill. Nandor Glade Riders heading across. I mean, maybe Dorwinion, considering now... I mean, Rhudaur have done very well, but they definitely have less manpower over here now than they did. Perhaps. The opportunity does exist to get the Glade Riders in behind enemy lines, but they're very weak to arrow fire, so it's a big risk. And you can see Snaga Archers are over here. I mean, if the attacker, or if the defenders, I should say, prepare for that, they should be able to deal with it without too many issues. I'm surprised that Gondor haven't actually had up here before now. They're going to send the Raven Hounds, which of course will be able to absolutely eviscerate Angmar Marauders, but fairly slow. Yeah, you can see the Alvalin Infantry. I mean, they're up here, but it's been a losing fight for Dorwinion for a while up on the walls, but to be fair, it's been a winning fight down in the gate. It's slow but sure progress by the Alvalin. The Alvalin are certainly a unit which focuses on defence more so than attack, but against a unit like the Corsair Infantry, they're able to absorb a lot of punishment, and slowly but surely they are going to force Umbar back through the gate, but they need to be ready to take advantage of that. They need to be ready to put on a genuine assault, because I mean, Umbar's ready within the gates with 2 units of a Dunedain Shield Guard. They will not go down easily at all. So the ball will be very much in their court. Balakith Marksmen continuing to fire. They will have racked up a very nice kill count for themselves with a perfect shot, even if it is against Alvalin. Yeah, here we go, look. Gondor now getting onto the walls, these Raven Helms. Against a foe like Angmar Marauders, it's going to be all too easy for them. What have we got here? Goblin Trackers. Arthedain Pikemen. Yeah, now you can see dismounted Faunus Terrain Knights have moved their way forward now, which to be fair are pretty decent against a unit like the Blackwolds. Yes, they'll take damage from the armour piercing the Blackwolds can dish out, but a lot of melee defence, a lot of base attack, considering the lack of armour on the Blackwolds. As soon as their hit points are gone, they will get absolutely shredded by dismounted Faunus Terrain Knights. Proudfoot Protectors shooting. Dunedain Troll Slayers are here, a really effective unit of Javelins as well. But how much do the Hobbits and Arthedain over on this side of things have left in them, would be my question. Because I think between Rhudaur and the Angmar support that's been trickled over here, it's been a really punishing advance. For Arthedain in particular, I mean, the Hobbits have managed to get some units in behind enemy lines and have been a little bit of a nuisance. The Proudfoot Protectors have probably racked up a decent kill count for themselves. Now though, I mean, Arthedain, like I said, it's not that Arthedain's playing poorly. He's got the right idea here. He's getting his archers up onto the walls now. In terms of a pure skirmish fight, Arthedain are going to have the beating of Rhudaur, especially with the high ground. The Reforged Javelins are still here firing missiles. Still 3 dismounted Knights of Illuminus up in their face, to be fair, including the General, but I mean, that can't last for too much longer. These big, savage, spiky clubs, not going to last too much longer. A lot of damage being done there as well. Arthedain Marksmen, another unit of Arthedain Marksmen on the walls, so perhaps things are starting to turn for Arthedain and the Hobbits. They've weathered the storm, and perhaps now they can start to assert themselves a little bit on this front line, unless they see more Angmar reinforcements arrive that aren't Snaga Archers, of course. In melee, they're just very much there to try and make up the numbers and prevent the front line from faltering too much. But I'm talking more in terms of something like Enslavers or some more genuine infantry from Angmar. Speaking of Angmar, though, they're holding the line against Gondor Infantry and Pelagia Marines, who presumably try to use their javelins, but again, like I said, like this front line, comprised of Witch-Realm Pikemen and Barrow-wights, like attacking it from the front, it's going to take a long time to kill them like this, and Pelagia Marines and Gondor Infantry and melee are not the units to do it. by any means. Up here though, things are going a little bit better. Ravenhounds have taken a lot of damage. You can see there's some arrows breaking in half as they thud into the walls. Goblin trackers shooting in, but again another unit of Gondor infantry made their way up here, so the Angmar marauders will fall away, but the Ravenhounds lost their lives for this, so it's going to have to, Gondor are going to have to take advantage of this again. Gondor's reinforcements are a little bit too far away. Putting your units closer, I mean, you'll take the odd loss from the towers, but that's not really the important thing. You need to be ready to reinforce here. This is much more like it from Dorwinion. Now they see the opportunity to come in. Umbar maybe taking things for granted a little bit too much after a relatively comfortable fight on the walls for the longest time. But now numbers coming forward. Morroquendi Pikes being the anchor, the Elvelyn infantry and the Erenvorn axemen adding a lot of human numbers to this assault. And all of a sudden, what will Umbar do in the face of this? Much better. The Hobbit, well actually no, that's not Hobbits, that's Erenvorn axemen. Similar colour scheme from afar, in my defence. Elvelyn infantry here. I mean, the Adunheim Shield Guard are fantastic at holding the line, but the problem is they're alone, they don't have any support. And like any spear, they're a very high tier spear, but not the highest damage, especially against heavily armoured infantry like this and pikemen. Elven pikemen at that. The one worry for Dorwinion might be that the Erenvorn axemen, in much the same way as the spears on the front line for Umbar, are unsupported. Maybe a unit of more genuine quality is needed. The AP is all well and good, and they will inflict a toll on the shield bearers, but Umbar will have their morale hold together much better than the men they're facing. Balaketh marksmen in melee going to be able to finish off these Erenvorn axemen as well. But the fight getting a little bit messier, which tends to favour the attackers in this sort of situation. Now Velen Vinegard going to be defeated back there. I mean, most of Dorwinion's army at this point is forward. They've got some Glade Guard, got some Bowmen. Whatever happened to the Morroquendi Glade Masters? That would be my question. Are they on the front line somewhere? Don't tell me they got shot. That would be devastating. There they are. Yeah, and they're going to rip their way through Balaketh marksmen. Truly one of the scarier units of infantry in the game. Yeah, Gondor slowly but surely mulching their way through there. Gondor sending their own... Well, actually, no, that's the Enuminous Gate Guards from Arthedain, so sending some support over there. But you can see here, Angmar still resolutely holding the line. The Barrow-wights are taking losses. Gondor, it's not rapid progress, but it is progress. And you actually see over here as well, the Barrow-wights... I mean, mass is a bit of an issue here. I mean, if they're unsupported, Barrow-wights can be pushed through. In come the Axemen of Lasarnak. Snagar archers are routing. Better times this for the attackers. It's definitely been punishing up to this point. And here we go. The cavalry is now being activated. Nandor Glade Riders coming in. Running amok. Dunedain Rangers have managed to get into the settlements as well. So yeah, they were able to push them back ultimately. Dismounted Faunus Knights. Rhudaur marksmen now being finished off. Arthedain marksmen shooting Rhudaur as they try and save what they can from this initial defence. But yeah, I mean, it has ultimately... They have ultimately been able to push Rhudaur back, but it has definitely cost the Hobbits and Arthedain very dearly to do so. But now the dominoes should start to fall, as we often see in a layered siege like this. And it doesn't get much more layered than CARN Dune, very clearly laid out like that. But now they should be able to come across to help Gondor break through Angmar, I should say, not Arthedain. And then they should be able to do the same. Ooh. The telltale green streaks of death. It's come just a little bit too late for Gondor, hasn't it? If they had managed to do this like 2 or 3 minutes ago, maybe that wouldn't have happened. But Angmar has just done a ton of damage to Gondor there, right into the blob, which is probably why Gondor didn't want to blob up in the first place. Very fair, fair enough. But yeah, I mean, Gondor can still smash through here relatively quickly, but that's a lot of damage that Gondor just took, and the defenders will be very happy about that. Because Gondor were one of the they were the healthiest attacking army that was left. Dorwinion continuing to sort of move on here. The Erenvorn axemen did end up routing in the end, but I don't think it's going to matter too much with all the Morroquendi in sort of centre mass of this attacking army. It is only a matter of time before Dorwinion are ultimately victorious over Umbar over on this side of things. However, these Morroquendi Glade Masters need to have a little bit more urgency about them than this, because they're taking unnecessary damage here from the Balaketh marksman. I think I know what the thumbnail is going to be. A shot like that. Right down the bow. I can tell you from personal experience, it takes a lot of arm strength to hold a bow like that. It's also not necessarily a good idea to hold the bow like that either. Spend too much time lining up your shot, and it's not good. Instinct is better. Just draw and release as quickly as possible, one swift motion. Meanwhile, Undyne Rangers, a lot of Proudfoot protectors still over here. So I mean, the Hobbits still have some scary units, like the Crossbows, certainly. Snaga Stalkers, front and centre, ready to be the fodder. Rodrum Javelins and Arthedain Berserkers are very depleted at this point on either side of that choke point. Witchhelm and Slaves are still over here. Well, fellas, I mean, most of Rhudaur is gone, to be fair. Like, Rhudaur dumped a lot of their strength into doing what they did on their gate, but I do think it was worthwhile for them. Now, though, the Umbar catapult, I mean, seeing more of an opportunity to do yet more damage to Gondor, and Gondor's loitering around down here too long already. When the Witchers did that to them, they should have been trying to force their way through into safer spaces than this here. And now they're taking a ton of damage. Goblin Tracker's broken and fighting to the death. Axeman of Lasarnak, victory seems certain. Defeat seems certain, only a military genius could win this battle. In come the Nandor Glade Riders, what are they going to do? Are they going to try and scale the hill? Probably not, because there's still pikemen here, but the pikemen are taking a lot of damage, to be fair. Once again, the attackers have now seized the walls. They put their archers on it, and they're going to try and use it to good effect. So Gondor may have taken a bit of a beating in the latter stages here from the catapult and from the Witchers, and they continue to do so. But they're trying to make the best of it, which is good. Dorwinion, though, have now managed to force their way through Umbar. Again, one of the reasons why Gondor maybe should have picked up the pace a little bit sooner was they could have sent across a couple of units to support and help Dorwinion get through here even more efficiently. As it is, Dorwinion's looking pretty battered and bruised as well, and that would be my main concern with the attackers at this point. They've spent so much of their manpower up until now getting this far. Do they really have that much left in the tank? So I'm going to say it's unlikely. I actually kind of fancy the defenders' chances here. Vineguard and Balaketh Marksmen are going to face off against one another, but the Vineguard are exhausted and shaken. The Balaketh Marksmen are steady and warmed up, so in spite of the numbers discrepancy, maybe we'll see a surprise there. Although engaging like that is not how you're going to win this Marksman. Still the Glade Masters as well. I mean, when you have units like that still alive, there's always a good chance. These Kerandros Marksmen fearlessly facing down the catapult. The catapult's actually got quite unfortunate there. It's missed so many of their shots. Again, this is another example of Infinity 7 sending forward a single unit into the jaws of a fight they're not going to win. We saw it with that initial unit of men-at-arms. Admittedly, it's only just under 20 and even escape guards he's sending in, but I mean, you can't afford to be wasteful with any of your manpower at this stage in a battle. More arrows coming in. Coming forward now, the Marksman of Kerandros, Axeman of Lasarnak are here. There's still Barrow-wights down here, which is probably what's throwing Gondor off. He wants to secure himself, which is fine. But these Barrow-wights are doing exactly the job that they always want to do. Get in the way and be annoying. The Ram is coming up, pushed by 14 Longbottom Mob. Interesting positioning here from the Proudfoot Protectors. Trying to get into a good position, I think, to shoot. Well, they were going to try and shoot the Rodrum Javelins. They did get a volley off as well, so fair play to Froggy. Definitely finding those angles, but I don't know whether he or Arthedain's armies are going to be able to hold themselves together in the late game, because the main concern, of course, is back here. Angmar in particular still have quite a lot of their strength in reserve. Definitely a quality focused army from Angmar, but this is what you would expect when they're fighting on their home turf. Goblin Trackers still doing their thing. Those Marksmen of Kerandros are now really depleted, but they have absorbed a lot of the catapult ammunition, which, to be fair, the catapult could have been used more in a more devastating fashion when infantry was blobbing up on the hills. So I actually think that's one of the rare situations where a more expensive unit can be used as artillery bait, and they're continuing to absorb ammunition from the Goblin Trackers as well. Got to look for the best in these situations here. Again, more of these little orc holdings out here. 2 units of Corsair Crossbowmen from Lord Sylvestron. Or Lord Sylvestrion. It's quite a sinister sounding name, really, isn't it? It's not the sort of name you would imagine to be out of place in Umbar. But yeah, again, I think it's a similar situation on this side, actually. Dorwinion, I don't think, has got the strength to push up this hill, especially not if those crossbows are crossfiring them all the way. So, I mean, it is interesting here. I think the attackers, because of the losses they've already taken, coordination is now more important than ever for them if they're going to be successful in this fight. I mean, I still think that, I mean, Gondor have got the army that's in the best condition in spite of the fact that it took that Witcher volley. I still think they're the ones in best condition. It was on the flanks where the more brutal fights happened. This one over here in particular was especially bloody. Some of Gondor's units are coming over here now, and now you can see an attack coming in. Actually, the Snaga Stalkers advancing down the hill to try and swallow the farmers of Buckland whole, but they're getting shot. Absorbing ammunition, though, for the Snaga, not necessarily the worst thing for them. Arthedain marksman. Farmers of Buckland here, going after the Goblin Trackers. I don't know if crossbow bolts are necessarily the most efficient thing. I mean, you're going to need crossbow bolts to deal with stuff like the Blackguard and the Hammer Guard in the later game. We've got their Rhudaur Berserkers. I mean, I suppose, like, between them at least, Arthedain and the Hobbits have got a decent enough force. It's individually that I'd imagine the problem is. And they still have their Dunedain Rangers. Is the thing, if you can keep key assets alive and useful into the late game with ammunition like that, it can be very, very useful. It can be the sort of thing which can definitely turn the battle in your favour. But definitely a bit of a lull in proceedings here. I think the attackers are kind of considering how best to approach this, and I don't blame them. Because, I mean, they are in a tricky situation. Helvellyn Vinegard moving forward. If I were Dorwinion, I would just sort of bide my time and wait, because I do actually think that whether it's Gondor or over on this side, yeah, the cavalry moving in now, Orc fellas moving down the hill. I think Angmar are just trying to be as efficient as possible, but sending in one unit at a time is going to be hard. These heavy swordsmen, though, dismounted Faunus to Rain Knights. Again, against something like Orc fellas, they're going to be really dominant as long as they can group up. But they've already taken a lot of losses, whereas the Orc fellas haven't. But also, by the same token, the range support is now here for the attackers. And Orc fellas, needless to say, against ranged units are not the best. There's definitely room for improvement on that count. Proudfoot protects the nearby. They're out of ammunition now. You can see they've got their pikes out. Shielded as well. I mean, they really are an all-round fantastic unit for the Hobbits to use, so it's not surprising that Froggy dipped into the red limit so heavily for them and brought 3. There though, Rhudaur Berserkers, again, really, really vicious thrown projectiles that they have. And let's not forget as well, they're pretty decent at melee. There may only be 27 of them, but with how some siege battles go, sometimes it's by these margins that battles can be decided. I do like the general Rhudaur aesthetic. I like the axes that the Rhudaur Berserkers have. I like the fact that it's like a spiked club and an axe all in one. It really does fit the savage aesthetic they have. Ooh, that's grisly. I mean, to be fair, it could be worse. Like when you're dealing with the Witchers, like when they hit your army, like it can always be worse. But you can see here that good coordination from the defenders. They threw the Witchers of Angmar volley in. And now, it looked like they were actually going to use the Witch Arm and Slave. They are. They're going to use the Witch Arm and Slavers. They're going to try and push the attackers back down the hill. More punishment heading the way of the Hobbits and for Arthedain. Those two in particular would have a vested interest of getting rid of this ghastly fortress. Gondor and Dorwinion are fairly far away from such concern under normal circumstances. Marksman of Andros firing up the hill once again. Continuing to fire, and it is actually a testament to how good the armour is on the Witcher-armed pikemen that these these pike units haven't been completely wiped out by the Gondorian archers yet. I mean, they're taking a lot of losses, of course, but not as much as a more basic unit would. Over here, meanwhile, heading towards the final 10k frames here, Morroquendi bows shooting in, getting a decent angle onto the Corsair crossmen, so good work there from Dorwinion. Is that Morroquendi bows? Yeah, it is. Where's the black? Oh, there are the black streaks on their projectiles. It's just, it blends in against the walls of the fortress. Poison arrows, so yeah, Corsair crossbows, very poor under arrow fire. Some crossbows may have heavy armour and shields to deal with this sort of thing, but the Corsair crossbowmen don't. They can hide anywhere, but that's it. Balakith's shield bearers trying to hold the line, but alone they're not actually going to be successful in that. And Umbar do need to find a way to get their crossbows involved if they are to continue to hold on to this choke point. Otherwise, Dorwinion will secure themselves a neat little victory here. Over here, meanwhile, again, just sort of small probing attacks on the front line. Out of ammunition, Palagi Marines and Marksmen of Andros going into the depleted pikes. But they're not so depleted that these dregs from Gondor are going to be enough to kill them off, to be honest with you. Final 10k frames this. It is reasonably close, to be fair. I mean, the defenders, it says the defenders are behind at the moment, and I believe it. The problem is, though, the defenders, Angmar in particular, still has such quality left. Whereas the defenders have had to, well, the attackers, I should say, have had to use more of their quality, I think, in their struggles so far. Goblin trackers, that looked like, yeah, it is. It's Dunedain Rangers from Froggy and from Infinity 7. So again, is it worth using Rangers on this Goblin tracker blob? Maybe, because you do need to try and get up onto this defensive position more quickly. Try and force them back into the final stand. I think that's the MO here. Routing units back there. There's still Citadel Guard from Gondor. I mean, Gondor have a few units of good quality as well. There's still the Proudfoot Protectors, which, again, Pikes in the late game. Can be so effective. But it is going to be a struggle here for the defenders, because if you fall behind in a siege and you're the defenders like this, in the late game the momentum can shift against you and it can be almost impossible to get it back, and that will be what the attackers are hoping for here. This is a little bit more like it. More numbers. They're going to swallow this unit of Witcher on Pikeman whole. There they are as well. Catapult. Continuing to try and do some decent damage. The catapult probably hasn't paid for itself, but it has worried the attackers, I think, into making certain decisions, which is as good as you can hope for. This is a bit of a blunder, this from Umbar. Like, you can't afford to have these crossbows killed like this. They didn't really use any other ammunition. This is good for Dorwinion, because Dorwinion, it has been a bit of a struggle for him in this battle, but Blue Ranger has definitely made the most of this particular lapse in concentration from Umbar. Forward come the Nandor Blade Riders. And they're going to be enough to do a lot of damage there to the Corsair crossbowmen. They should be. Pull back and then charge into them. Finish off those crossbows, and that's a really useful tool for the defenders that you're going to be able to get rid of. They're going to charge off somewhere else, though. They're going to leave it to the Nandor Blade Guard instead. The catapult crew is running away. The catapult's probably out of ammunition anyway. It's going to be lethal, this. I mean, it's a charge bonus of 20. The Glade Riders are incredibly fragile, but incredibly damaging off the charge. Bit of a bending charge, that, but that should still be sufficient to do some damage, and indeed it was. I mean, like I said, Angmar are the ones with the quality in the late game here for the attackers. Upgraded armour on these guys as well. They need to get them inside the gates here. They need to retreat everything at this point, because it's all going a bit pear-shaped. I think the defenders did very well on the first layer, but here on the second layer it took a little while for the attackers to sort of figure out what they were doing, but once they did, they acted decisively, they got their units into good positions, and as a result, I think they have seized the momentum in this battle. Like I said, it can be so difficult for the defenders to get it back from this position, which is what I would be concerned about if I were them. Meanwhile, still acting as the rear guard, this one unit of Witcher on Pikemen, any kills they get from this position will of course be a nice bonus for them. But little more. Gondor's quality is going to be very important here going into the late game. Ooh, the trolls have come down here. That's interesting. I mean, they'll be able to kill Gondor infantry en masse, but Fountain Guard and Citadel Guard with their AP are the last thing that these trolls of Gundabad are going to want to face. Fighting tooth and nail for their homeland. If trolls even have a concept of a homeland. What do we got here? Yeah, I mean, looking at this, it's very scattered. I mean, if the Witchers still have maybe a volley left in them, that could be the great equaliser here, and it could leave things looking very even in the late game. I like the fact that Dorwinion's coming over here first and foremost. I mean, they have to wait for the ram to get up to the top anyway, so they may as well help out against these Witcher on Pikemen, smooth Gondor's passage a little bit more, because every man is going to count here into the late game to take this final position. Blade Master's still alive as well, very strong unit indeed. Ooh, hello. They have actually been able to get in through this gate before it had a chance to shut here, the Dunedain Rangers from Infinity 7. A downhill charge from the Witcher on Hammer Guard and the Rhudaur Marksman, though, which is going to be pretty punishing for them. Still the cavalry able to finish off the catapult crew, to no one's great surprise. Dunedain Trollslayers are still here again, still with some javelins, very effective in melee as well. The ram is up here, which is good in case the gate does close. The Numinous Gate Guards, I'm amazed they're still alive, to be honest with you, considering the situation they were thrown into. Or maybe he had two units and I just didn't notice them. Rangers from Froggy. Yeah, it's looking good for the attackers here, I have to say. I was worried for them at one point in this battle, but they have brought it back a bit. Here comes Dorwinion's ram. They're going to be able to ram through from this side, attacking from both sides. And I find it hard to see how the defenders come back from this, if I'm being honest. But we shall see. Yeah, Fountain Guard are there. Again, like something like the Dunedain Troll Slayers in melee in this sort of situation can be so useful. However, both the Hammer Guard and the Enslavers of the Witch Realm, two really high damage units of bodyguard tier shock infantry, when they're fighting side by side, that is a scary sight as well. I mean, it's ideal for the Javelins if they can get an angle on them. They're trying to, you can tell, but again, I think it's one of those situations where you can see the unit, but it interacts a little bit weirdly with gates, and I don't know if they're going to be able to get a volley off at all here, which of course would be a shame for them. Proudfoot Protectors back there. Dunedain Rangers. Still some Glade Masters. Elvalin Infantry. Slowly but surely battering their way through that gate. And over here, Umbar will be less scary than the two shock units on the other side. I mean, Harbingers of Castamere is still really strong, but the Blackguard will probably be needed over here as well, as Dorwinion try to fully flood in. Dorwinion, Arthedain, the Hobbits taking point once again, and then the final hammer blow maybe from Clem's Gondor army here. Because I find it hard to see, as I said, how the defenders can scrape their way back into having an advantage in this fight. I've been wrong before, but Blackwatch Legion, interesting kind of unit to have here. I mean, they're getting shot with arrows, but that won't bother them at all with their thick armour and their massive shields. And here, these two units of shock infantry mulching their way through the Hobbits that were on the front line, as well as the Nandor Glade Guard. Dorwinion's ram is through. Both gates now open. Can they shut this gate on them once again, I wonder? Rhudaur marksmen in here as well. Warm meat on the front line, as well as some goblin trackers as well. Everyone has to do their bit in the late game here if the defenders are to hold on to CARN Doom's Citadel. The Witches are still there. I mean, the Witches aren't terrible in melee. If it comes down to small numbers, they may not be as devastating as the Nazgul. Also, very fortunate actually. I mean, if I were the Nandor Blade Riders earlier, I would have prioritised the Crossbows over the Hammer Guard, to be honest with you. Because look at this, they're now able to get some good shots in. In come the Javelins though from the other side, so the Keldon River Patrol able to give as good as they get in that situation. Don't know what Umbar's doing here. Umbar hasn't had as good a game as Angmar and Rhudaur have in this game, I would say. But I mean, still, some elite units that he has left, the Crossbows and support. It's not impossible, especially considering the fact that the Glade Masters are actually over here. That being the case, I'm actually a little bit surprised they haven't been committed already. Dunedain Troll Slayers are here. They're almost getting engaged in melee at this point. Proudfoot Protectors trying to shoot. Still cavalry as well. I mean, just with the... I think it... In terms of pure numbers, I just think that the defenders are out of luck here. They will be able to make the attackers... Well, the defenders, yeah. The defenders will be able to make the attackers bleed for this. But I think that's the best they're probably going to get here. And here we go again. Again, good choice of target there. Dunedain Rangers from Froggy getting into a good position. I mean, it's not right down the line, but you know, you won't be able to get the angle if you do that. So he's picked pretty much the ideal position for the situation. And those body-piercing projectiles will be able to slowly but surely shred away at the Corsair Crossbows manpower. And that will be yet another important unit that they will have lost. And I think this battle goes to show that the attackers just have more margin for error, because the defenders, I think they had the upper hand on the first layer. The attackers had the upper hand on the second layer, but the attackers are still in better shape. In come the Witches, charging downhill. They're going to do what they can here on the front line, these elite units, but I just don't think it's going to be enough when push comes to shove. What have we got here? Still just hanging out. One Rhudaur Ranger. Not a single one of these defenders is going to live to tell this tale, I'm afraid. There's no real way out for them unless one of them is a particularly good rock climber. Which actually I imagine the men of Rhudaur probably can scale a cliff or two. Dunedain Rangers still there, doing their thing, and now they're shooting the Harbingers. Arthedain's general, who has been living a charmed existence for a long time, considering his close brush with the Ferocium javelins earlier in the fight, finally falls. Yeah, Harbingers of Castor, at this point they need to move in, because if they stand still they're just going to get shredded. So they're going to charge downhill. A glorious end in melee awaits them. How much can they take with them? We shall see. These Blackguard need to be moved in somewhere, I think. Again, you may as well send them in to help out Umbar, because you're already sending in another unit of a Blackwatch Legion to try and help hold this line again. It will end in failure, but at the very least you will be able to do some more damage to the attackers as this goes on. But a good game, I have to say. A good game to essentially bring the curtain down on this particular build of the game, which has been fraught with some mechanical issues for me personally. But with every passing patch, Reforged does have stuff added to it. And we'll be moving on to that, and I know exactly the battle that I'm going to be opening up on with the new build. It's going to be Minas Morgul. So that will be the next battle, at least if all goes well. Now that we're all on lockdown, things are a little bit more forgiving with regards to the schedule. I can sort of pick and choose when I record and what I record a little bit more so than I did before. Gondor moving forwards. Gondor and Dorwinion, so yeah, I mean this is what I kind of expected. The Hobbits, Dorwinion and Arthedain, the workhorses throughout most of this battle, and now here in the late game, Gondor's going to be the hammer to smash the final hopes of the defenders here. Dunedain Trollslayers slipping their way through, actually, interestingly enough. Which on Blackguard probably should have been committed a little bit sooner. Mac in the Wild, not a player I've seen a great deal of, I don't think, but he's done quite well for the most part in this battle. That was maybe the only decision I would say I massively disagree, well, not even massively, kind of disagree with. But by then I don't think it would have made much of a difference either way what he actually did anyway. And now, doesn't matter how much quality you have if the army around that quality is non-existent now. And that's true on both choke points at this stage. Harbingers of Castamere fighting pretty much alone against the finest that Gondor have to offer there. The Fountain Guard coming forwards. The Fountain Guard, when they get the wind in their sails, always a scary opponent to behold. More damage being done. Axemen of Lasarnak. Victory seems certain. Only a fool could lose this battle. Well, quite. Of course, our crossmen pulling out their harpoons in melee. Again, everyone will die with weapon in hand. There's still this one Balakith marksman. Is he going to get a kill? Again, holding that arrow for a long time. I guess this is how the Black Numenorians flex. Well, I mean, he didn't get a kill there. The Fountain Guard that hit didn't even flinch. Proudfoot Protector's also going to do their thing. Froggy's done very well in this battle as well, I have to say. Just the positioning. Like, you can always tell when a player has played the game a lot. Just because some of the individual things they do, like with regards to their positioning and when they choose to move, that sort of thing, it's always a little bit more clear. And Froggy is definitely one of those. Which on Blackguard, actually, Angmar admitting defeat, deciding not to go down swinging. And yeah, they're taking control of the settlement now. But Umbar will be the last one standing, I think. The Harbingers of Castamere will fight until the bitter end after all. Unless Rhudaur has got some... Ooh, that's a bit grisly. Poor dude. Don't know where... Yeah, there's still a few units from Umbar sort of running around over here, doing their thing. All of the attacking armies do have at least something left though. I mean, Gondor in by far the best shape. Then I would say it's the Hobbits, then probably Dorwinion. And then Arthedain bringing up the rear in those terms, because they definitely took a real beating on the first layer, but they made the most of it nonetheless. Blade Riders coming in, they're going to finish off the Witcher on Blackguard here, regardless. The player may have admitted defeat, but the general at least died in glorious combat. Here are the Harbingers of Castamere continuing to swing their weapon around. The Harbingers won't go down too easily, of course. Again, like much of Umbar's higher tier units, locked morale. It's not unusual for a bodyguard tier unit like the Harbingers, though. In general, if you want a faction with good morale, then Umbar is one of the best ways to go, because you have a little bit of versatility there, but also just the core of your army is always going to be really difficult to just sort of finish off. Here you can see the joint efforts of the Elvellyn and the Citadel Guard. Citadel Guard, of course, by far and away the more damaging of the two units. The Elvellyn Vine Guardsmen there actually lost interest for a moment. Oof. Nice swing from the Axeman of the Sarnak there. He can claim that big old sword as a trophy, I think, after that. That's pretty much it. I mean, there's still a couple in here. Well, he just fell. So where's the last one? It's in here somewhere.
Our enemies may have won this battle.
There we go.
They've not won this war.
I don't know about that. Losing your capital does kind of constitute losing the war from Angmar's perspective. And there will be peace in the north once again as CARN Doom falls. And again, this is the second battle in a row that we've seen Evil on the defence and, well, on their home turf as well, and Evil lose. So I feel as I think some people think that because Evil is capable of bringing such high numbers, even on the defence, means that, you know, it's a little bit easier for them. I don't necessarily think that's the case, and I think in terms of quality here, that did show itself. In spite of the fact that the Forces of Good did take losses on the push forward, they still did very well, and I do think Froggy deserves a lot of credit for that again. Gondor had the lowest amount of kills because they were the most conservative player, but again, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, because when they were aggressive, they immediately had their nose bloodied by the Witchers because of the position they were in. So I actually don't blame Clem for holding back a little bit more, because I do think it was the right thing to do in this situation. But yeah, I think the attackers were good value for the victory, to be honest with you. They recovered from their beating on the outer layer very well, and the second layer was very heavily in their favour. I think the defenders, maybe they just committed a little bit too much to the outer layer, or they just weren't able to organise themselves quickly enough. I think the cavalry as well was fairly decisive, slipping in and around, and perhaps the decision could have been made to completely abandon the second layer and just go straight back to the final layer. It's not very sporting though, so I probably wouldn't have been approving of that, even if it would have been maybe the smarter thing to do. But yeah, I do think the attackers were good value for the money here. I think that they played well, but ultimately it was actually a pretty high quality game. I don't think anyone played too poorly. Umbar will probably, there could have been a few improvements in how they set their stall out. Angmar as well, like maybe they held a little bit too much of their quality back in reserve, whereas both Rhudaur, especially Rhudaur, but also to a lesser extent Umbar, was also willing to send forward more elite units like the Arthedain Shield Guard early, which again I'm always a big fan of, because it means you make life a little bit more unpredictable for the attackers. But yeah, that is what it is, and I do think that the attackers were just about good value, but everyone did very well. Obviously Rhudaur got by far the most kills, but that's not too surprising because they were up against effectively two decent sized armies as well, in the Hobbits and in Arthedain, of course, and they were very well situated. They also got a bit of support from Angmar as well, so good interplay there. But of course, yeah, I do think the attackers were good value, as I've said several times. Arthedain Pikemen did very well for Rhudaur, as you'd expect. Good numbers across the board here for Hrothgar. Witch Realm Enslavers doing very well. Arthedain Berserkers, obviously with their thrown projectile, also doing well. Witch Realm Enslavers were only committed late on, so it does actually go to show how effective they can be in melee. Ferocium Javelins did quite well after their volleys. They were also one of the units that was actually saved to a certain extent from the initial defence down on the first layer. Some of the archers breaking 100 kills, which is impressive. Ettenmore's Troll Hunters getting what I would consider to be the bare minimum kills for them to be considered worthwhile. Rangers did quite well for themselves as well. This isn't this kind of settlement which it's really easy to use Rangers on, to be fair, but in any battle, Rangers can be used to good effect if you get them in the right position, of course. But a good position by Hrothgar, a good. Let me rephrase that a little bit. A good performance by Hrothgar. Good performance by everyone, I think, to greater and lesser extents, but ultimately I do think the attackers deserve the win here. But that is how we bid goodbye to the current build of the game, or at least for the most part. I think there are still a couple of battles I will be doing on this build, and I will sort of earmark where they are, and I am still willing to take replays from this build, it's worth saying. But just know that obviously preferential treatment will be given to battles from the new build, because of course everyone wants to see the new stuff a little bit more so. And of course, with Minas Morgul, a replay that I already have on the new build, I think that's a pretty good way to kick things off in this new era that we are in. So yeah, nice to see that it's out and about. I'll be interested to see what the mechanical changes are like, what obviously some of the fixes are, of course. It's not as big as 0.97 as the patch was, but I would even be quite tempted to call it 0.98, if I'm being brutally honest, because I think enough changes were made and it grew into something bigger than just like a minor fix. There's not a great deal of new things with regards to like units and the like, but I suppose what they are sort of waiting for is 0.98 would be when another new faction is introduced, which is fair enough. Maybe 0.97, 0.1 would be more fair. But yeah, big thank you to Hrothgar for sending this one in. Big thank you to all the players for being a part of this very nice battle. Big thank you to 0.97.0 for being my companion for this past year or so. Slightly less than a year, maybe. Slightly more. Around that sort of time, anyway. So yeah, a big thank you to that, and I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.